grandmother's last name is Cardaro, Cardaro, and she or her family is from Naples. Unfortunately, with my grandmother's side of the family, I never asked her as many questions as I did with my grandfather, but I do know that she was born in the United States, and I do not know if it was her mother or her grandparents who were born in Italy, so I'm not quite sure. But my grandmother was someone who I grew up with. My father divorced early, and my grandparents moved in with my father and raised me, so I had a very close relationship with my grandmother and grandfather. And she was the one who, at least early on, did a lot of the cooking, and there were certain things that my father enjoyed her cooking more than my grandfather's cooking. My dad and I moved in with my grandparents when I was little, and my grandparents raised me. And when I was young, my grandmother worked at a hospital because my grandfather had a heart attack at the age of 42. So between the two of them, they were the ones that primarily raised me while my father worked pretty much a typical 7 to 4 job construction. And my grandmother and my grandfather both cooked, and there were certain dishes that my father enjoyed more that my grandmother made than my grandfather. And his favorite was her meatballs. He didn't like my grandfather's meatballs at all. He always thought that they were too hard. And then the other dish that she made that I loved that my grandfather didn't make was split pea soup. And the other one was lentils. So my father didn't enjoy lentils and split pea soup as much as I did, but those were two of my favorites. And interestingly enough, when I was a child, I didn't like meatballs. I preferred sausage to meatballs. So it was very interesting in terms of my grandparents would always try to cook what he and I both enjoyed. So we ended up always having almost a dinner for him that was different than the dinner for the rest of us, which was wonderful. So being in Calabria these last 2 weeks and eating dinner at 9 o'clock, 9:30, it made me think about my grandparents. And every day of the week except for Saturday, we ate dinner at 4 or 4:30. My father would come home. As soon as he came home, he wasn't allowed to shower. He just went, washed his hands, sat at the table, and my grandparents would have dinner prepared, ready to go. And if he ever came home late, they would be very angry. And then the other thing I was thinking about was my favorite dish that my grandfather made that he taught me how to make, which was brujol. And I love brujol. He would use salami or prosciutto or anything that he had in the house, along with breadcrumbs and olive oil. Sometimes he would put peas in there. And as I got older and I started cooking myself, I started looking at Sicilian recipe books and seeing what kinds of items they put into the brujol, and they put raisins and pine nuts. And so when I made my grandfather my version, he didn't like it. He didn't like the raisins, he didn't like the pine nuts, but those are the kinds of memories I have of my grandparents when it comes to food. So my path to Italian American Studies is circuitous. I was the first in my family to attend college, and then one of my childhood friends was an artist, painter, and he talked to me about the idea of he was going to get a master's degree in paint during the summer and teach during the year. And I wrote poetry, so that I decided eventually to go to school or graduate school. And it was at graduate school that I met John Paul Russo when I was deciding on a topic for my dissertation, who suggested Don DeLillo, and specifically Underworld. And then another colleague in the department, Robert Casillo, was doing a book on Martin Scorsese. And so during that time, John Paul suggested perhaps trying to find an Italian-American poet to fit in, to have a complete Italian-American maybe dissertation, but that didn't happen. And then after that, my first AHA conference, now IASA, was in 2006 in Denver, and John Paul couldn't attend, and he told me to look for Anthony Tambori and Fred Gardefeu. And so I'm at the hotel, and lo and behold, the elevator door opens up and the two of them walk out. And ultimately, I've looked at the two of them as mentors ever since in terms of my career studying, publishing on Italian American studies. My name is Alan Gravano, and I'm president of the Italian American Studies Association. And in terms of the future of Italian American studies, especially in the U.S., is difficult to predict. I know that in terms of my own scholarship, there's a limited number of places in terms of either looking to publish those types of articles, or another thing that some of us have to think about is sometimes widening our scope. So for example, this spring I'll be presenting a paper on Diane de Prima and Lawrence Ferlinghetti, but at a beat studies conference. So I think the only way that Italian American studies is going to continue and or exist in the next millennia is to keep finding inroads in other areas. So, for example, Fred Gardefeu was president of MELIS, and they actually have a special topics on Italian American studies, and last year I was lucky enough to present on that. So I believe it's about making inroads in American studies or in MELIS or in the beat studies and bringing in the Italian American angle. The future of Italian American studies in Italy is happening right now at the University of Calabria. 2 summers ago, I was lucky enough to participate in the first Italian diaspora summer program. And now I've been asked back by Professora Margherita Ganeri to teach. I'm teaching classes on the Italian American beat poets, Gregory Corso, Diane de Prima, Lawrence Ferlinghetti, and Philip Lamantia, and also 2 classes on Quentin Tarantino. And what I've seen with the CLIA course is that students in Italy have an opportunity to study Italian American writers and get a perspective from both their Italian instructor as well as the guest lecturers that are coming from the United States to lecture on various areas of their various expertise. And so I feel that students at the University of Calabria are really getting a head start even over the students in the United States, since in the United States there are only a handful of programs that do Italian American studies.